Now that we're in the new year, what do the pitchers on the 40-man roster need to do to improve in 2025? Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Thursday, January 2nd. This is your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on Twitter, Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and an Instagram as well. And as always, you can find all my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. And now that we are in the new year, and we're still waiting on the Braves to do something as far as signings, a major league signing, it's pertinent to look at the roster and the 40-man roster as it is now. Everybody's doing the new year, new me thing in 2025. So let's figure out what the pitchers on the 40-man roster need to do to have a better year than they did the year previous. And we're going to go in alphabetical order here. There's 23 men, 23 arms on the 40-man roster. So not going to spend a lot of time on everybody, but we're going to try to touch on at least one area of improvement for everyone. And go in alphabetical order means the very first guy is Ian Anderson, trying to come back from Tommy John surgery. Obviously, won a World Series in 2021, struggled in 2022, got sent down, had Tommy John, and missed all of 23, was in the minors in 24. And despite his best efforts, just wasn't able to make it up to the major league roster down the stretch last year because the Braves were trying to win every single game to get into the postseason. And the biggest thing for Ian is going to be the control. It's one of the last things to come back after Tommy John. And he's never been known as a guy with very good control. In his major league career, he has a 10.4% walk rate. In AAA last year, which he was there, he made 10 starts, 52 and a third innings. It came out to 11.8% walk rate. Now, we've heard a little bit of comments about what he's been trying to do, working on his arm slot, some of that stuff. But with the way that this organization has prioritized walk rates, lower walk rates for starters, and then that strikeout to walk rate, that ratio there for their minor leaguers, it feels like Ian Anderson's make or break is going to be how many free passes does he give up? I've talked about this before. I have him slated to be the number 4 pitcher behind Chris Sale, Spencer Strider, Reynaldo López to open spring training. Spencer Strider would jump ahead of him in that almost immediately once Strider comes back. But the question is going to be, can he keep the walks down and be effective enough to hold a rotation spot all year? Or is he going to be a guy where they have to figure out what to do with him because he's putting up ERAs over 5 and things like that? Going alphabetical order again, the next guy, Aaron Bummer. He's one of 2 guys where his big job here is to earn the trust of Brian Snitker. I think he's one of the best relievers that we have because he's very good at not giving up hard contact, and especially because he's so good at getting ground balls, not giving up barrels. Last year, 3.58 ERA, which doesn't sound that great, but all the underlying, the inputs were better. 2.23 fielded independent pitching, 2.80 expected ERA, and a 100th percentile barrel rate. I believe 1.3% may have come out to either 2 or 3 barrels, and he only had 1 allowed all the way up until September. So Aaron Bummer, to me, and I wrote this story back when I was at SI. I wrote a version of this story back when I worked for Athlon Sports. Pretty sure I put a version of this on the Braves Today newsletter so far. Aaron Bummer should be a high leverage reliever. Brian Snitker has not used him like that, but the proper usage of Aaron Bummer is in a close game when there's runners on base and you need a ground ball to turn the double play, to get the out at home, to keep runs off the board. Hopefully, he can do whatever he needs to do to show Brian Snitker in spring training and when the season first starts That's how he should be used. Davis Daniel, next guy in the alphabetical order on the 40-man roster. He needs to reestablish himself as a major leaguer. We did this article on the newsletter, bravestoday.com. What did the Atlanta Braves see in Davis Daniel? He is phenomenal when he can stay ahead of hitters, first pitch strikes, and can land the fastball for a strike enough where he can then use the slider. I want to see him use the curveball more. That's an Atlanta adjustment. They like to have you ramp up usage of a breaking pitch if it's a good one. The fastball shape isn't amazing. The velo isn't fantastic. I think he can regain a little bit of that loss of velo, but if he can stay ahead of hitters, be able to use that curveball to keep him off balance and don't get into disadvantage counts where you have to groove a fastball to a major league hitter, I think Davis Daniel can be an adequate number 5, number 6 spot starter kind of guy and could reestablish himself as a major leaguer. I have less confidence in Dylan Dodd. The lefty, you saw him last year. He was used as a starter in AAA. He was used as a reliever in AAA and a little bit in the majors. In AAA as a starter, 5.13 ERA with a 287 batting average allowed. As a reliever, combined between the minors and the majors, 7.02 ERA and a 375 batting average allowed as a reliever. Again, some of the relief appearances were in the majors. None of the starts were, so there's a little bit of a caveat there. But the velo, 92.1 as a starter, 93.5 on the fastball as a reliever. If you're not going to have overwhelming stuff, you have to get better with your locations, with your sequencing. And Dylan Dodd just has to figure out the role, right? Atlanta did not. Yeah, you needed starters. They've used between 10 and 13 in each of the last couple of years. They did not once ask him to come up and make a start because it looks like they don't have faith in him as a starter. So can he grab a bullpen role? This team has openings for lefties. We'll get to a couple more guys in here behind your Aaron Bummer and Dylan Lee. Can he take one of those lefty roles, maybe as the long man in the pen, while Grant Holmes is in the rotation? For Bryce Elder, his resolution needs to be recapturing 2023's magic, because you saw that he did work to add velocity, and you saw that some last year. He was throwing the fastball about a mile an hour harder, and a lot of that ticked over into the other pitches, the slider and things like that. But Bryce Elder's issue last year was, and I don't know if it's connected to the extra velo on the slider or just coincidental, but he lost about 3 inches of drop on that slider. And as a guy who was already sometimes prone to accidentally leaving these sliders in the zone a little too much, catching a little too much of the plate there, 3 inches in drop less on a slider that you hang is the difference in hanging it in the bottom third of the zone and hanging it over the heart of the plate. So Bryce Elder, I am a believer that Bryce Elder can give you, if everything goes right, he can give you 180 innings. He can be a number 5 starter and just take the ball every 5th day and keep you in games. He won't shut people down. He won't single-handedly win a game for you. He's probably 8th on the list of guys I'd pick to throw a no-hitter. But Bryce Elder can keep you in games, provided he can keep his slider doing what it needs to do and work on the locations, not miss up, but miss down. So figure out what happened to the slider. Is it related to the extra velo? Is it something else? Figure that out, Bryce Elder. For Conor Gillispie, I'm intrigued by what he does. He needs to add some sort of vertical breaking pitch. His whole thing, fastball, changeup, cutter, slider. Okay. Fastball obviously stays up in the zone. Changeups running back to the arm side. Cutter and slider both move to the glove side, but there's less movement on the cutter than the slider. So the slider is moving more extremely to the glove side. The cutter is a little bit of glove side movement. But when you look at a pitch plot, none of that stuff drops down. It's all, at best, it's neutral from the release point. Nothing drops vertically. And so unless he gets good at aiming pitches down at the beginning, like when he releases the pitch, his release point is he's trying to get it down. Nothing is going to drop below a barrel. Maybe, I don't know what he's thrown in his career. Maybe he's a candidate to add a curveball. Maybe he's a candidate to add something like a splitter, something that has natural vertical drop. Maybe he can be one of those double slider guys where he has more of a sweepy type slider And then he has something like a gyro slider that can and does drop below the zone, give him an extra dimension. Because right now, it's very much an East and West game. That works for some players. It works for Chris Sale. He won a Cy Young off of it. Chris Sale also has one of the best sliders in the game, has fantastic fastball velocity. Conor Gillespie's not that guy. So find something that breaks vertically or find a way to not telegraph out of the hand a pitch you're trying to throw down so that you have a little better ability to fool a hitter. Domingo Gonzalez and Daysbel Hernandez. Let's compare them together because it's a similar issue here. Domingo Gonzalez is trying to get a call up, while Daysbel Hernandez is trying to stick in the bullpen. But for both of them, it comes down to walks, right? Domingo Gonzalez, 10.4% walk rate in AAA, has not had a ton of, has not come up yet. So he has to show the team that in those higher leverage situations, in the minors at least, he can throw strikes consistently and not give up free base runners. It's the exact same story for Daysbel Hernandez. So far in his major league career over 2 seasons, 13.8% walk rate. If he wants to get high leverage situations from Brian Snitker, and I think his velocity absolutely would play in those situations, he's had 19 plate appearances in high leverage situations, according to Baseball Reference, as they classify a high leverage situation. In those, opposing hitters are 2 for 18. I think they were both singles, 1 walk to 7 strikeouts, and I think 1 run allowed. So he's been good, but if he wants to earn more, he has to not walk almost 14% of the batters that he faces. So both of these guys, Domingo Gonzalez, Daysbel Hernandez, have to be better about not giving up free passes. Gonzalez, so that he can hopefully debut in the second half of 25. Hernandez, so that he can step into a higher leverage role, with the understanding there could be a closer spot open after 2025 when Raisel Iglesias is a free agent. Let's see what happens. Grant Holmes. We'll get to Iglesias in a second. Grant Holmes, going in alphabetical order here. Thrive as a starter, buddy. I am a big fan of Grant Holmes. When Atlanta got him, they gave him a slider. He didn't have a slider before, which is wild as a right-handed hitter to not have a slider. A right-handed pitcher to not have a slider. When they moved him to relief, his velo ticked up, and he kept a lot of those games when he went back into starting from time to time. He's probably going to be the 5th starter to open the year. He'll probably, I think, your best case scenario here for Grant Holmes, or your most likely scenario, most likely positive outcome for Grant Holmes, is starting in the rotation, moving to the back end of the bullpen, but being the guy that if you need a 6th starter, he can be that 6th starter in a week, spot start, doubleheader, whatever. And if you don't, he can work out of the pen. He can let it eat. He can just be his amazing self out of the pen, the fastball slider combo. He does more stuff, but that's what I'm excited about. And then just go back and forth as you need him to. I'd love for him to take a Spencer Strider-like leap when he goes from relief to starting, where you have to keep him in the rotation. I'd love for that to happen. No promises on it. I don't want to expect that. But either way, Grant Holmes, I think, can thrive as a starter, and that is your job. Is come into spring training ready to take the ball every 5th day, ready to go 6 innings, give the team a quality start when you go out there. If you can do that, the sky is the freaking limit for Grant Holmes, and I'd be down to give him a long-term deal just because I love the idea of rewarding a dude like that who you grabbed for almost nothing as a minor league free agent, fixed him, and he's done so much for this team in just the short year he's been here. Raisel Iglesias continue being dominant, right? 1.95 ERA last year, best ERA of his career, 34 saves, tied for his single season high in his career. But also, figure out, and I don't know off the top of my head exactly why, figure out why his strikeout rate dropped to a career low 26.3%. 8.8 strikeouts per 9 innings, his lowest in a full season in his career. Was some of that pitching to contact with the changeup because you knew Snit was going to ask you to take 2 innings down the stretch like he did so often, come in and get the 9th and stick around for the 10th or something like that? Or was it the stuff ticking down because of usage and workload at the end of the year? Let's figure out what happened with the strikeout rate. So if it's something preventable, we can fix it. Last guy before break, Joe Jimenez. This one's easy. Get back on the field. I think the ideal scenario for Joe Jimenez when all we know right now is that he's expected back late in 2025, if at all. I think the best case scenario here is get him back by the end of the trade, like by the trade deadline, right? It's like acquiring a reliever at the trade deadline, one that should hopefully have a fresh arm if you end up having to use some of these back end guys like Iglesias more than you want to. So the goal for Joe Jimenez, get back on the field in 2025. Again, hopefully, I think the goal should be the trade deadline. We'll find out more when everybody reports to Northport in just over 2 months. It's right around Valentine's Day in February when everybody reports to Northport. In just a minute, let's get the other half of the 40-man roster, what these pitchers need to work on in 2025. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby talking about the New Year's resolutions for the pitching staff of the Atlanta Braves on the 40-man roster in 2025. Looking at Pierce Johnson, a couple things here. I think he has to be more consistent overall. And by that, there are games, there are at-bats, plate appearances where he gets a little out of sorts. He's a heavy curveball guy. That was the big adjustment they made when they got him from Colorado, was throw your curveball a lot more. It is by far his most frequently used pitch. But when he can't quite command it, he doesn't have the confidence to go to the fastball and some of the other pitches. He ended up running a 10.6% walk rate last year. And then also not having the confidence in his secondary stuff to get out of a jam. He gave up 23 runs last year. 15 of them came in a total of 6 outings. He had some 3-run outings. He had some 2-run outings. And what I think the next leap forward for Pierce Johnson, who's probably going to open the year as the primary setup man to Raisel Iglesias, even if you think it should be Dylan Lee, who's coming up next, or Aaron Bummer, is he has to be able to cut those rallies short, right? You've given up a run. There's a runner in scoring position. You got it in the inning. You can't let that spiral into take your 3-run outings into 2-run outings and your 2-run outings into 1-run outings. That'll, I think, be a big step for Atlanta in a year where you won't have Joe Jimenez and you looks like you're not going to have AJ Minter either in your back end mix. For Dylan Lee, just like Aaron Bummer, he has to convince Snit that he can handle high leverage. If you sort by the number of high leverage opportunities that the relievers got last year, Dylan Lee was 7th. Daysbel Hernandez got more high leverage opportunities than Dylan Lee. And I'm trying to remember who wrote this. I think it was Austin Kane Reach over at Battery Power. In the last couple years, Dylan Lee has been one of the best pitchers in baseball at racking up chase and not giving up hard contact and runs. He's been one of the best despite his stuff not being great. From a spin rate perspective, from a movement perspective, a velocity perspective, his stuff is below average. But something in that profile works. And opposing hitters don't see it out of the hand very well. They don't pick it up on the way to the plate. They don't hit it that well. And so what Dylan Lee has to do, similar to Aaron Bummer, is he has to convince Snit that he can be a high leverage guy so that either him or Bummer are your 7th or 8th inning guys in the absence of Joe Jimenez. I don't know what it's going to take. If it's going to be lockdown spring training, if it's going to be doing it early in the season, but they got to convince Snit that they can do it. For Reynaldo López, I think the conversion to starting went better than anybody could have expected. 1.99 ERA, albeit with an expected ERA and fielded independent pitching that were worse than that. We're expecting a little bit of regression on that. But the goal here should be picking up more innings. Okay, he threw 135 2/3 innings last year because he went on the IL twice down the stretch. Charlie Morton threw 165 1/3. And as of now, we talked about this on an earlier show a couple weeks ago. Reportedly, the Braves aren't interested right now in bringing back Charlie Morton. If Reynaldo López can pick up Charlie Morton's 165 innings, or preferably more, 175, something like that, and I am fully confident he can do it with a better ERA than Charlie Morton had. So that helps offset the loss of Charlie Morton. And now you're just trying to find another 5th starter. Because Charlie Morton, in essence, would have been your 5th starter had he come back this year. The expected performance he was going to give you, the innings count, was 5th starter quality. So If Reynaldo López can turn that fifth starter um, production, accumulation innings into third starter quality, that raises the floor and I think the ceiling of this rotation. And now you just have to find somebody else to take Reynaldo López's to do those 135 innings. Rolddy Munoz, who was added to the 40-man roster to protect him from the Rule 5 draft, get to the majors. He threw 40 and 2/3 innings in Double-A, 18 walks, 56 strikeouts. The velo's there. You're trying to work on the walks. You're trying to work on the leverage situations. He could be a back half of 2025 debut if everything goes well. I think you probably want to put him in AAA to start the year. Let him be one of those guys that pitches higher leverage situations out of the bullpen to get him ready for what he needs to do when he gets to the majors. He'll be a lower medium leverage guy in the majors to start off, but put him in those situations early in Gwinnett to get him ready for that. Angel Perdomo, just come back from Tommy John and take a role in the bullpen. Again, we need lefties. AJ Minter's gone. You may be using Bummer and Dylan Lee in higher leverage opportunities. There'll be an opportunity for lower leverage innings from a lefty in the pen. It's a four-seam slider combo. Throws about 94 miles an hour before the injury. We have not seen him in competition since Tommy John. He had it October 6th of 2023. He'll be about 18 months removed. He's a dark horse to make the opening day roster. What's probably more likely is spending the max 30 days that you can do on a rehab assignment in Gwinnett so they can see what his stuff looks like before he's called up to the major league roster. Also, because you don't have a ton of guys that have options in this bullpen, that's a way to move around and get a little bit of extra flexibility, is being able to put somebody who's nicked up on the IL, replace them with Perdomo a month into the season. Anderson Pilar, another reliever candidate. I like what he does. Throws 6 pitches, primarily cutter slider. He can get ground balls with the cutter. He can get whiffs with the slider. He doesn't throw a lot of strikes. His goal is just get to the majors. He'll be a depth arm they cycle through in the bullpen. I feel good about what Anderson Pilar could do in 2025. He just has to perform in AAA and get the opportunity to come up. Chris Sale, honestly, don't change a thing. There's not much. I mean, you won a Cy Young last season. There's not a concrete thing where you're probably saying, I have to get better at this. It's just being prepared to have a second straight significant workload, right? He was fully healthy until the very end of the year, doing what he has to do to stay healthy, put up a full season. He's the de facto number one. I'd go as far as to say right now, he's likely your opening day starter. I don't see any issue with making him the opening day starter, obviously, but just keeping him healthy throughout the year so that when you get to the postseason, he can take the ball for whenever you need him to take it, and he's available, because he was available all the way through the year until the very end, and you want to keep him around. Spencer Schwellenbach, similar to Reynaldo López, I want to see him take on a bigger workload. I want to see him replace Max Fried in the rotation. Schwellenbach threw 123 and 2/3 major league innings, another 45 in the minors, had a 3.35 ERA in the majors. And like we've talked about before, after those first 5 or 6 starts, his ERA was in the low 2s for the rest of the year. Max Fried threw 174 and a third innings with a 3.25 ERA. I think Spencer Schwellenbach can beat both that innings total and that ERA. Again, he came close to beating that ERA on the season. And if you just look at after the adjustment period, he was better than Max Fried statistically down the stretch. I want to see the innings. He's close. He's like 168 when you count the minor league stuff. I want to see him replace Fried as far as being the number 2 in the rotation, as far as putting up the low 3s ERA, if not better, and pitching 175 or more innings, making 30 starts. I want to see Schwellenbach do that. That should be his goal for 2025. AJ Smith-Shawver, establish yourself in the rotation, okay? He's been up in parts of multiple years. Some of the prospect shine is off from external evaluators because they don't love some of the results he got in AAA and things like that. Those of us who watch this show every day and read my stuff at bravestoday.com know that the Braves were being really funky with his usage tweaking his slider shapes and all of that stuff. And then obviously he dealt with an oblique injury. I am convinced that AJ Smith-Shawver can get an opportunity. He's probably on the outside looking in for one of the 5 spots to open the season. But I think similar to what Bryce Elder did in 23, when Smith-Shawver gets called up to make a start in 25, I don't think he's going to go back down. I think he's going to be good enough on an every 5 or 6 day basis to stay in the majors all year. And if you do that, you add a ton of athleticism to your rotation. You add a dynamic arm. The kid can hit 100 miles an hour. He throws a slider, a curveball, a changeup that he worked really hard last year to get more comfortable in. It's a full 4-pitch mix. And I think he can be just a dynamic lights out starter if he gets an opportunity. That should be his goal in 2025, is do the offseason conditioning and workouts to be in prep, like to be ready for 150 inning workload in the majors in 2025. And I think he'll thrive if he gets that. For Spencer Strider, it's really easy. Just return to being an ace, right? We don't know what the adjustment period is going to be to come back from the Tommy John, from the elbow surgery. We broke that whole thing down on a show last week, not Tommy John surgery, but to come back from the elbow surgery with the internal brace. We don't know how long it'll take him to get back to the classic Spencer Strider form. I'm confident, though, it won't take as long as a lot of people outside the organization are worried about, simply because of the work ethic and the biomechanical understanding that Spencer Strider has of how his body works and what he can do. So his goal, obviously, reestablish that. Because if you get Spencer Strider back being Spencer Strider, the guy that led the league in strikeouts in 23, was a Cy Young finisher and all that, I would go to war with Chris Sale, Spencer Strider, and Spencer Schwellenbach, and Reynaldo López. I'd put them up against any other 4 pitchers in baseball from any other rotation. I don't think there's another 1 through 4 that I would rather have in baseball than those 4 guys. Get Spencer Strider there however long it takes. I think you have the rotation depth to give him more time in the minors to start the year if you need to. I'm not worried about it. Hurston, Waldrep, we talked about this a little bit on the Tuesday mailbag. You got to get the fastball command dialed in. The splitter, the breaking pitches, they only work if folks are worried about missing on a fastball for strikes. If you can't throw the fastball for strikes, the other pitches aren't as scary. Again, a lot of external evaluators think that he's trending more towards being a high leverage reliever. He's obviously more valuable as a starter. We got to get him there. So Hurston, Waldrep's got to work on the fastball command where he can reliably pound it in the zone so that he doesn't have to try to groove a fastball to avoid a walk and give up a tank because it's a iffy fastball shape, right? You got to work on the command because if the fastball's not working, you can't get folks to chase the sliders and chase the splitters. Last guy here, Alan Winans, got to figure out how to get his stuff better. Average fastball velocity is 89.6 miles an hour on his. I think it's his sinkers under 90, his four-seamers barely over 90, like 90.1. It's a changeup dominant profile. I personally have never liked changeup dominant profiles. Seems to be like it's a liability that your best pitch is a slower pitch that's just designed to be a timing thing. They can sit on something like that, especially when it's not that hard to, if you're sitting on changeup, to catch up to an 89 mile an hour fastball, right? Does throw a slider as well. Maybe relief he can tick up a little bit in velo. I don't know. I'm really worried that Alan Winans is going to end up being a quad A starter. He won some awards in the International League last year as a starter, but the stuff other than that first start against the Mets where he was just trying to get vengeance against them for not believing in him after they drafted him, it's not worked in the majors. And you either need to move him in a minor deal while he has some value, or you've got to find a way to make the stuff better. One of those two. It's the only real options you have with Alan Winans if you don't want to end up having to DFA him for roster space in May and lose him for nothing. This has been Braves Today for Thursday, January 2nd. Listen on audio. Do us a favor. Leave us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell when we drop the next episode. Tomorrow, we are back with the position players on the 40-man roster. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.